American dream is something that makes our country so special. The fact that you can choose your path, set your goals, and achieve success however you define it. That is why we're known as the last place on earth to escape to. Well, that comes with a cost. The cost of freedom is paid for by our veterans. Life, Liberty, Happiness is happy to be playing a small part in capturing our heroes' stories. Our series, called Veteran Voices, will focus on getting to know the men and women that have sacrificed so much. We hope you enjoy this series like we are. If you're a company that wants to sponsor this segment, please contact our staff at 434-444-1874 or email emma@mediasquatch.com. Be a part of preserving our history for future generations. Stay tuned as Veteran Voices is about to begin. Welcome to the show, Sergeant Steve Bozeman.
Well, glad to be here. Thank you.
So for those, I'm sure most people who do know you probably know you for your the Monument Steps, right?
Yeah, Monument Terrace, Troop Rally every Friday from 12 to 1.
So I don't know. I don't do a lot of research on purpose because I'm curious about your life. So tell me kind of where your journey began, where you were born and raised.
Montgomery, Alabama, September 12, 1946. I was probably one of the first baby boomers born that year. My dad was a World War II Navy vet, and he was stationed here in Lynchburg, Virginia at the Preston Glen Airport. And that's where he met my mother. She lived here, born here, and they somewhere in the movie house they met and threw popcorn at her, and the next thing you know, they got involved and became a boyfriend and girlfriend. And when the war ended, they moved back to Montgomery and got married in Montgomery. And I was born in September 46, and then two other of my siblings, Pat and Gail. Mm-hmm. So we stayed there in the old country of Alabama for a while. And he was a mechanic at the airport, actually fixing repairing aircraft.
Okay. And
kind of ironic that I am, the next generation, I'm a helicopter aircraft mechanic myself.
Wow. So high school years, when did you start thinking military was going to be in your future?
Well, typically I had a girlfriend and an old beat-up car that I drove around, and the Vietnam War was heating up in 1965, and we had an old black and white TV. And my brother and I were living with my grandmother. I had moved back to Montgomery after I stayed here for a few years when I was 10 or 12, 13 years old. So here I am back in Montgomery, and my dad was in construction, and so he kind of pawned us off to grandmama, I call her Granny. So she took care of us for about 4 or 5 years until I joined the Marine Corps. So at the time, I had a full-time job, making a little, peanuts, and girlfriend. And I was pretty happy. And then Uncle Sam sent me that notice saying, come for your induction.
Okay.
To check out your physical and see if you're A1 to be ready to fight the war. So that was probably late summer of 65.
Now, were you scared when you got that?
No.
Okay.
It was just where I was living in the projects.
Okay.
Government housing projects. And a lot of the guys in there had joined the Marine Corps and the Army, and before they got drafted, they just joined the service.
Okay.
Just to get out of the environment they were living in. Mm-hmm. So when I got my induction, I went to the physical, and there was about 200 people in the physical taking the guys, and within a couple of days we were done, back home, and then within a week, here comes the Marine Corps recruiter in his dress blues, knocking on my door, and he saw my car out front. I had actually raised the hood and working on it, mm-hmm. And he said, "You're a mechanic?" I said, "Well, a little bit." He said, "Well, the Marine Corps needs helicopter mechanics, aircraft mechanics, and we need to, if you would join us, we'll like to have you." And where I was living, I was, my grandmother, we were poor, And I said, well, might as well join and make some money and send back to her.
Nice.
Yeah, so I enlisted, they call it the delayed entry in October 65. I raised my right hand in Montgomery, Alabama, then signed up, and then I hit Parris Island on January the 2nd, 1966.
And then from there, after basic training, where do your travels take you then?
Typically, the Marine Corps, it's about 12, 13 weeks at Parris Island, but Vietnam was pretty hot, so they were trying to rush us through.
Oh, okay.
So we did everything in expedited method, and we didn't have mess duty or anything. We just did all the grunt training, everything that the Marine Corps boot camp was about. And then after that, it was about 10 weeks. Then we caught a bus to Camp Geiger, which is up near Camp Lejeune. Camp Geiger is the Marine Corps advanced infantry course. You stay there about 3 weeks, going through all the infantry training. And then you go on leave, and then you report to your next duty station, which was Millington, Tennessee, where they taught how to do electronics, mechanics, and all kinds of stuff on aircraft. So I stayed there about 5 months. And then September, I was in Camp Pendleton going through another 2-week infantry training. So even though your MOS is different throughout the Marine Corps, you're basically a rifleman no matter what you do. So I enjoyed the infantry part of it. And then, of course, I had signed up for the aviation guaranteed. And I was thinking, my gosh, I should have just stayed infantry. But I didn't know what was waiting for me on the aviation side of it until I got to Vietnam. And then I had orders to the helicopter squadron, HMM 361, which was old reciprocating engines kind of left over prior to the, I guess, after Korea. Sikorsky had made another kind of helicopter that was perfect for Vietnam.
So when you get sent to Vietnam, where at in Vietnam are you at this point? Do you recall, like, where are you getting dropped in at, essentially?
Well, you land in Da Nang Airport.
Okay.
And thank God I flew over commercial airlines. So me and about 200 other Marines flew over, landed, and during the daylight. And then, of course, when the door opened up and the heat and the smell of Vietnam hit you, everybody remembers that until, you just remember that.
Yeah.
And then you're off board, and then you go through processing and figure out which unit needs you the most. And I guess this particular helicopter squadron needed a mechanic, and I was assigned to that one. And they were stationed down in near Chu Lai, which was about 50 miles south of Da Nang. So I had to catch a C-130 hop down there, and then find my way to the squadron, and then report in.
Are you for you just being in Lynchburg a little bit in Alabama, going to Parris Island? Were you, before you even get to Vietnam, were you ready for that? Or you know the war is coming, so that you're ready to go, and then you travel to Vietnam, and probably hadn't traveled a lot in your life.
No.
I mean, you're what are you, 19 years old?
Yeah, I just turned 19, and I never have been on a commercial aircraft, never have flown. And here I was eventually going to be flying a helicopter.
Yeah.
So.
Were you ready? I mean, did you feel ready, or you're 19 and don't know what's even about to happen to you?
Yeah, I was, still thinking that I was a young man.
Yeah.
I had dropped out of high school to kind of help with the finances with my grandmother. And plus I was bored in high school in 11th grade. So I said, okay, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And back in those days, they didn't have any counselors trying to keep you there. They just say, well, you dumbass, go ahead and drop out.
That's exactly right.
So and long story short, I did get my 4-year degree in college education later on after Marine Corps. Yeah. But anyway, back to your question. I was well trained as a Marine infantry going through all the different training, jungle warfare, and then when I got to Vietnam, I wasn't really scared at all. I just figured I felt like I was invincible, but I found out later you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I reported to my squadron and started becoming a mechanic.
Yeah.
But all the others, I've seen other reports and other people who, they draft dodgers, and they just mention Vietnam, they're going to head to Canada. But I thought that was just my duty. And of course, President Kennedy, his words were, not what you can do for your country, what the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Yeah.
And that resonated with me back when I was thinking about, okay, do I want to just let the Army draft me, or join the Marine Corps, or even the Navy? I had that time I had a choice. I could go all 4 branches if I joined. But I wanted to be a Marine because I've saw all the Pacific landings they did, all the heroic duties, Iwo Jima.
And the dress blues.
And the dress blues.
they hook you every time.
You're right about that.
Yeah, they do get you.
So how long were you mechanic? I mean, is this the whole time you're there, or what? Just the first part. Take us through your time while you're at Vietnam.
Good question. I was a mechanic right off the bat, so I was trained on a reciprocating engine, and the H-34, UH-34 had a 18-cylinder engine, and it's a big, powerful engine. It's Sikorsky built, and it could carry about 8 fully armed, loaded Marines, and maybe 10 or 12, Vietnamese type troops. But yeah, when I got there at Key Ha, Vietnam, which is just north of Chu Lai, I was a mechanic for about 3 months, and they didn't let me fly until about January, February, as a door gunner.
Oh, Lord. So you're on the side.
So each aircraft, you had 2 pilots and 2 door gunners. One's a crew chief, and the other one is on the other side of 34 was a window, and that was my job to make sure that anybody shooting from that position, I shot back with my M60 machine gun.
And you picked up that training while you were before you got to Vietnam, or you got there and they said, "Hey, jump up on that M60 and just start shooting"?
Fortunately, they did let us go out over the ocean and shoot at some barrels with the M60 machine gun.
Oh,
we had about probably 3 hours of training. Kind of, it depends how fast the helicopter's flying.
Yeah, you
kind of you figure out how to lead. And then and every 5th round is a tracer, so you can see your red tracer going where your barrel is pointing to.
Most people don't know that when you're like watching movies or watching video. You see the tracers running, but there's bullets in between those that are going too.
Yeah,
right. It's just unbelievable.
4 bullets and 1 tracer.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, I had enough wherewithal to point and shoot properly. And so once you got to your first flight as a door gunner, of course you're very anxious.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I'm still okay. At that point, I'm going out in the jungle. I'm going to go into a hot zone, and then that's where you figure out all this training is going to pay off or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So so you were a mechanic, so you work on the fleet and you're a gunner? You're doing both things?
Yeah. Wow. So, when you get back the aircraft, you have to clean it up, get it ready for the next mission, and then if there's any technical issues with the engine or anything, it can be fixed right away. You start working on that, or some wheels, or a flat tire, or anything that relates to the aircraft, the helicopter.
So I imagine you being in that hole, and you're the gunner. They certainly know you're either bringing supplies or Marines, the ones that are on the ground, the Vietnamese. They also know that you're the guy with the M60. The lifespan of the gunner was not much, right? I mean,
it says about 2 weeks if you a door gunner. Once the bullets start flying, you're about probably a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So that was the question that I wondered, because you're getting in this thing, the dangers, obviously, but if you go out and come back, Are you upset if you don't get some sort of action? I mean,
No, not really.
are you happy just to get back alive?
Just have to get back to the
Right,
squadron,
yeah.
get back to your hooch and check out, and then come back next day and do it again. So that my first mission was, like I said, January or February. I'm not sure the date. And of 66, 67. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So it went to a hot zone, and we were just offloading some water and 5-gallon jugs, some bullets, and some seed rations. So
You're supplying the ground troops.
we are, and that's what they're basically Marines in the air wing do. We support the infantry on the ground, either the fixed wing or the air helicopters. And typically, you have probably for every grunt on the ground in the jungle, you probably got 10 to 12 Marines back in the rear taking care of supporting that guy.
Yeah. Wow.
So in our case, we were supporting the infantry and bringing in supplies and taking out the wounded or dead if needed.
Wow. Was there when you had to work on the helicopter that you just landed on the next day or that afternoon or whatever? Did you ever see like a hole, a bullet, or something like wow, that was a little close?
Yeah. It was typically it's a big the skin of a helicopter is about as thick as a paper. I mean, it's very light, very thin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And bullets come in, and it's a very noisy environment when you land, and when you're flying, you land. So once you get in the zone, the pilots typically have full throttle to take off on a moment's notice. So you're either offloading or loading up, doing that quick. It could be a minute at the longest, or 2 at the really longest. And in this case, my pilot he had headsets, and he's telling me to shoot once we get on the ground. And I'm looking at this tree line, and I don't see anybody shooting at me. And I wasn't told you could just freely shoot, so I was going to hold my trigger. So I'm thinking, God, he's yelling at me. I better shoot. And then I was getting ready to pull the trigger, and thank God I did not, because about 20 feet in front of me was 2 Marines' helmets and behind a bunker type thing. And my barrel at that time, because I was so daggum nervous, was pointing at their daggum heads. So I quickly raised the barrel just enough to shoot over their heads into the tree line. And that moment right there, when we took off, I thought to myself, I just could have killed 2 Marines on my first daggum mission.
Wow.
And that would haunt me forever. So
Yeah.
So I learned real quick on the job training.
Yeah.
Make sure you know where that barrel is pointing.
Amen.
And not at a friendly Marine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So did you have any that you started taking fire that became a hot mess quick?
Well, that particular ones we didn't take fire, but I guess the pilot wanted to make sure. So we both, me and the crew chief, we shot out, and then we took off and we landed back at the base, and we checked the aircraft. There was no bullet holes in it, so we assumed that we did not get shot at on that mission. But in future missions, we did.
Oh,
yeah.
So how long did you stay? How long were you there?
Well, the Marines serve 13 months, and everybody else, Air Force, Navy, Army, served 12 months. And the Marine Corps, for some reason, felt like that we're going to keep you there 1 month longer, which means you get shot at 1 month longer or a chance to get killed.
But you volunteered to go back. Am I right?
Yeah, and that's another long story.
Yeah, sure. Well, we're here. This is your story. We want to hear this. Yeah. And just to let you know, by the way, I know you have grandkids and great grandkids. Yeah. And the reason Brian and I want to do this is if I could go back and listen to my grandfather talk about being in the Philippines and the tanks in World War II, I'd do everything that I could. These things that you're telling, we want your grandkids and great grandkids to be able to hear, or even their kids to be able to hear. It'll be on YouTube and it'll be here forever. So tell the stories that you want to tell. That's really what it's about.
I'm going to try to be very honest and not too much BS.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, sure thing. So you did decide to go back.
Well, the first tour was exciting. I'll put it that way. more I flew as a door gunner, the more you found out that you're picking up dead Marines and badly wounded Marines, and you're thinking, okay, this is real, and you're getting your hands bloody, you're getting shot at, and you're shooting back, and you're going back to the base afterwards, and you're decompressing, and typically we didn't really talk that much with each Marine, unless it was the same guy you flew with that day. You might want to share some of the anxiety you have, if that. But typically, just you did not. I'm not sure if that generation was different than what it is now. Yeah. So after many months of into June, July, and August, actually, the May 4th was when I got shot down on my medevac. And that was May 4th, 1967, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And we were, the Army had typically, they had the Red Cross medevacs, and they would fly particular missions, but Marine Corps didn't do that. They had, if you were in the area, you had a infantry calling to help you. That particular helicopter would spin off and go down and help. Or you would have dedicated helicopters. Like that day, we had two helicopters dedicated for medevacs. So we were supporting these infantry just not too far from where we were at the base. And we did it all morning, all early afternoon. And it was starting to get routine because they were taking a lot of casualties. We were getting shot at. And then at 5 o'clock, we got called again to go back out. So we headed back out there. And of course, I know we're going to get shot at. But we didn't get shot at going into a hot zone. But what the grunts did, they had them at the F-4 Phantom jets come in and they couldn't drop any napalm because they were too close to the Marines, but they just flew like treetop level, 400 miles an hour and making a hell of a noise. So I'm watching all this going on in the air, and then I'm hearing the pilots talking to each other. And then as we rotate down into the hot zone, I'm just expecting fire, but we didn't get any. So we landed in the zone, and what the enemy does, they know if you keep coming back, they can set up another place to shoot at you later as you exit. But a lot of times they try to shoot you in the zone so they can shut that zone down to keep any other helicopters coming in. So anyway, we got one badly stretcher patient, big black Marine he got shot in the chest. And then this other Marine, he got shot in the leg, so he kind of hopped up on the chopper himself. So we took off, flew about treetop level, maybe, I thought about 4 football fields lengths, maybe a quarter mile. All of a sudden, I'm hearing fire, bullets. And I'm looking out my window. I don't see anybody on my side shooting, but all of a sudden I hear my crew chief on his side shooting the M60, fired away. And then I look up, and what they did, the enemy had shot the transmission fluid in a helicopter transmission, and it caught fire and it was dripping down into our compartment. So I looked behind me and I moved the stretcher patient a little bit to get the dripping fire off of him. And then I went back to my gun thinking, okay. Then I heard the pilot say, "We're going down."
Oh my!
I said, "Okay, get ready." And I would make sure that the grunt was okay behind me, so I moved him out of the way. And I picked my machine gun up, grabbed about 2 feet of ammo, and then got ready to hit the ground. So just as I got to the ground, it hit pretty hard. So I just kind of fell out of the door, actually. I didn't know if I had jumped or what, but I just hit the rice paddy. And I had my M60 hugging like you wouldn't believe, real close to me. And I got banged up pretty good there. And then my first thought was, okay, the helicopter's on fire. We got 2 wounded inside. We got 2 pilots and then the crew chief. So I guess we all gonna get out somehow. And the helicopter did not roll over on the side, so the pilot was able to control it enough to hit, land it, and bounce and roll.
Wow.
So I went to the nearest dike, rice paddy dike, just to get behind the rice paddy, expecting I'm going to see, a couple of dozen or so gooks coming at me.
Yeah.
And nobody's coming at me. I'm looking around. I don't see any enemy nowhere. So then this is a split seconds.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm looking around and I turned around and looked back at the helicopter and I saw this one hand still hanging, waving. And I knew he was still in there. So I rushed back over to the helicopter. And you don't think about it. You just split second, you want to save somebody. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in a burning helicopter, and it was burning pretty good. So I rushed over, and I tried to get the stretcher out first, trying to keep yanking on it, and it wasn't moving. So then we had to reach up, and my crew chief finally came over and started helping me. And I reached up inside to unbuckle the stretcher. And then we was able to drag him out of the helicopter. And about that time, we had bullets in our ammo box, and I guess one of the boxes was in the heat, so it was starting to cook off.
Oh no!
So here we're gonna get shot by our own daggone bullets.
Yeah.
So anyway, we dropped him on the ground real quick, and then the pilot and someone else rushed over, and the 4 of us grabbed 2 arms, 2 legs, and hauled ass across the rice paddy, and got probably about 50 yards away. And then another helicopter. You always fly with 2 helicopters for this purpose. If one gets shot down,
Okay.
the other one can come in
I
and
did not know that.
get you out.
Oh.
So he came in, and we just loaded up the 2 wounded. And then I had fire. I had burns on my arms and hands from reaching up in the fire, and a few cuts on my face, and had blood coming down. So I kind of looked like I was hurt, but I wasn't really feeling that bad. So all the crew stayed on the ground, and then we had the infantry come over from the ground and to help security.
Yeah.
So they kind of gave 360-degree security around us. And at that time, we still weren't getting any enemy fire coming in. So I guess we were pretty lucky we landed in somewhere of a safe zone anywhere that behind enemy lines, anywhere is not safe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyway, another helicopter came in about a half hour later, and then I boarded up, and we all got on the chopper, flew back to Marble Mountain. And then I got off, and they wanted me to go to the hospital, get patched up. So I got a ride over to the hospital, and I went in there, and I didn't know how bad it was, but then it started hurting, my second and third degree burns on my arm and leg. So anyway, they started patching me up and stayed there about 2 or 3 hours, and then I got ready. The doctor said, "You're okay. You can go ahead and leave now." I said, "Okay." And the corpsman, he slipped me a little, those small bottles of whiskey.
Yeah.
He slipped me a bottle. He said, "You probably need this."
Wow.
So when I got back to my hooch, within a half hour, I popped that thing open and drank it in one big one big slug.
Yeah.
And then I had to go. So anyway, everybody was okay. The crew chief's okay. 2 pilots, and we all didn't talk at all. We just went our separate ways.
Yeah.
So the next day, apparently, I found out later, long ago, that they interviewed the 2 pilots and the gunner about what happened. They didn't interview me for some reason. I'm not sure why. But I had to go to the doctor it was a day or 2 later to get a mental checkout. Were you okay physically and mentally to fly again as a door gunner? And I got the okay to fly again.
Wow.
So within 2 days, I'm back flying again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
At this point, are you hoping the doctor says, "No, you're not going to"?
No, well, even though it was a near-death situation, and I think about it almost every day, how close we all could have been killed that day, just crashing and burning, and or just getting shot. I didn't feel like, okay, I felt like I could have been killed, but I felt like, okay, my job is to be a mechanic and door gunner and help Marines on the ground, infantry. So I just got back in the fight and was willing to keep flying as a door gunner. So anyway, of course, the other crew member, other helicopter mechanics and pilots, because at that time, I think we were the first one to get shot down by the enemy. So it was quite a something to be talked about.
Yeah.
Well, I bet. You're listening to Life, Liberty, Happiness. We are talking to Sergeant Steve Bozeman, the United States Marine Corps, at his time in Vietnam. So now that you've got that under your belt, so this was your first tour, right? This all happened. So that wasn't enough for you. You thought, let's go back again.
Well, after that happened, May and June, about July, July, I went on R&R to Bangkok. They give every Marine a week to go somewhere, R&R, rest and relaxation. And so I got Bangkok, Thailand chosen, so I went to Bangkok. I was going to go to Australia, and I had orders for Australia, but this pilot came to me. He says, I really want to go to Australia. How about if I give you a case of beer, you go to Bangkok? So why not? Yeah. So I got a case of beer and went to Bangkok, and he went to Australia.
That's amazing.
So when I was going for that week, my squadron had orders to go up to the DMZ at Dong Ha, which is only 8 miles from the DMZ, to help support all the infantry up there. So when I got back from R&R, first of all, when you fly from Bangkok, you stop, I forgot, was it Guam or could have been Guam, to refuel. And you could go to the PX and get 4 bottles of alcohol. And Ted Linsky, my buddy of mine, we flew a lot. He was a crew chief and I was a door gunner. He said, when you go in R&R, get me 2 bottles of scotch. And I got 2 bottles of bourbon. And at that time, they were only a buck and a quarter. So I got 4 bottles, and we caught the hop back to Da Nang. Then I had to catch a 1:30 hop up to Dong Ha. So I landed that afternoon, probably about 6 o'clock. And Dong Ha is only 8 miles away. So the enemy was constantly shelling with 122 rockets and right off across the border. And, of course, we couldn't go to DMZ and fight them, to destroy their weapons. So they rocketed us all the time. So as soon as we landed, the rockets were coming in, and the C-130 just turned around, took off again, and I offloaded. So I knew I did not know where my squadron was. They had the helicopters there, but I didn't know where my hooch was. So I had to go find my hooch, and I finally found it, and Ted was there. And Ted said, well, we got incoming, so let's grab a bottle each and head to the bunker. So we did. And we're not expected to be overrun or anything. We just knew that after about a half an hour, they're going to quit and come back and do it again around midnight. Yeah. So we went to the hooch and we started, Ted wanted to know how my R&R was. And I had to go in a little good time what I had. Well, in fact, I had $600. I saved up $600.
Wow.
And it wasn't much, you think about it now, but back then in 1967, $600 was a lot of money. Yeah. And when my squadron rotated up there, I knew that when I came back to Vietnam, my life expectancy was not going to be very good. So my goal was to spend every penny of the $600. And I did. And I spent every penny of it.
Nice.
So when I came back, I was broke until next month. But when I got back to Dong Ha, that night I got rocketed, and I reported next morning to the Radio Shack to check in, and the mission. I call it the Radio Shack, but it's where all the you check in to find out what your flight patterns are and what you're going to do. So I was assigned to fly gunner that day. So here I am, got a little hangover going on. So we flew up to the DMZ area and just supported the grunts up there. So every day we got rocketed, 4, 5, 6 times a day. And then on August, the last week of August, we got hit real bad. They destroyed probably 2 or 3 helicopters, and I was getting shell shocked a lot. We were starting to get not immune to the rockets coming in, but we were getting, any minute when you hear all these big rounds coming in and exploding, you're starting to get a little fearful that the rocket's going to fall on top of you, no matter where you're hiding at.
Yeah.
So that August, the week, they destroyed the helicopters. So the general flew up and decided to keep us there for another, a little bit longer. So September 3rd, which was only a week later, the enemy hit the fuel dump, the ammo dump, and the helicopters and the hooch. So everything was blowing up. So that morning, I had flew that night on medevac. So I just got in the hooch, just got my clothes off, just got ready to lay down on the cot, and here comes the incoming, about probably 7 o'clock. And then real quickly, jump up, run to the back door, and the hooch is about 40 feet long. And I hit that back door, and behind us was a big fuel bladder, like big as a tanker. And it hit the tanker, and the fuel bladder blew up. So it knocked me back on my butt. I didn't get burned or anything, but then I turned around and hit the front door and jumped in a bunker. And then that day was a long day.
Yeah.
They hit the ammo dump, the fuel dump. So September 3rd, 44 of us in the squadron got wounded with shrapnel, burns, and all kinds of injuries. So after about 4 hours, I'm from jumping from bunker to bunker after each one collapsed on top of you. The last one I was in was about 6 feet deep and about just shoulder wide. So I got in that one with about 6, 7 Marines. And then because all the ammo dump, fuel dump, all the hooches were catching on fire. We got tin roof, but we got plywood.
Yeah.
So all the plywood's catching on fire, and it's falling on top of the the bunkers, which is cloth. So the cloth's catching on fire. So then here we are in the middle of this big rocket attack, and we didn't know if we were going to get overrun or not. And I didn't have any weapons. When I hauled ass out of the hooch, I didn't grab a weapon.
Yeah.
So we had to, all of a sudden the smoke was so bad that we had to get out of that bunker. So then I was the last one out. And when I went out, I had to dive through a fire again to get out of it. And I had a shirt on. I'm not sure where I got a shirt from. But it caught fire and I rolled on the ground, put it out, got up, hauled butt to another bunker and stayed there for another hour. And by that time I'm going, my gosh, we're going to be here all day. So then it quieted down. The ammo was still cooking off. So then at that time, they started assessing who's hurt, who's not. And I was hurt enough to where they said, go to the first aid, which was a big underground bunker where they do surgeries. And so I went in there and they patched me up, put gauze on my burns and arms and my hand. And then they went back out topside. And then they had another helicopter come in and they loaded all us up at different times. It took us out to the hospital ship, USS Repose.
Okay.
And we used to fly in, when we took wounded out to the repos, we would take them out and fly and land a little small spot on the Navy ship. And here I am, September 3rd, I'm landing on it. So I went down below, they patched you up, and they, I felt like, okay, I'm safe. Thank God. Here I am. So about 4 days later, here comes a Marine general coming around. and we about 6 of us lined up, and he's giving out Purple Hearts. So he comes up to me and he looks at me and he says, "What do you think about these female nurses?" And my mouth had a big smile on it, and then someone took a photo, which I, for some reason or other, how I got it and still have it, I don't know, but I did. So that question was, "What do you think about the female nurses?" And then here I am thinking, yeah, I'm alive and I love it.
Yeah.
So he gives me his Purple Heart. So anyway, 2 Purple Hearts, near death, and I'm thinking my life is getting pretty, gosh, am I going to get killed the next mission I go on?
Yeah.
And one instance, we were on supporting these one grunts on this hill, but not a tree on the hill, nothing. And we kept going in every hour almost, bringing up food, water, supplies, bullets, and sea rations, and then taking out the wounded and dead, because they were getting mortared constantly. And then when we landed again, and believe me, the helicopter pilot wants to be in and out real quick. So we were throwing water out the door, bullets and sea rations, and then all of a sudden a big explosion. And then what happened, the mortar came in and hit right underneath the engine compartment.
Wow.
And shrapnel came up, and we had put 3/4 inch thick steel plates underneath the engine for that purpose. But some of the shrapnel went up into the engine and got a couple of cylinders. So we lost power. So as soon as he went full power on the helicopter, he knew he couldn't fly back to base. So we had to kind of auto-rotate down into the valley. And I had enough time then to thinking, okay, grab your M60, get ready again, because it's not going to be a nice landing again. So we landed, and the pilot saw another company of Marines down there, and he was able to land right smack in the middle of them.
Oh.
So we were okay.
Yeah.
So that afternoon, more helicopters came out from my squadron. So me and the crew chief, we helped peel the blades back. You could do that to where a big aircraft would come in, a big helicopter could come in and pick up on a sling and take the helicopter back to the base.
Wow.
So that one was okay.
Yeah. Wow.
We landed okay, and but that could have been another tragedy.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what your mind and body adapt to. You know, I mean, adapt and overcome, I know is a philosophy there. But it's
adaptation.
It's just amazing to me that your mindset and to go back. So
Right.
so when in that time frame, when did you, a second tour, did you go back through all of that again?
I'll tell one more story, but
Sure.
But typically, everybody, all the enlisted crew members, all the officers, I mean, this is something that was normal.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't out in the jungles with the infantry doing their thing, but what we were doing was pretty normal. And believe me, a lot of infantry, when they get on the helicopters after you drop them off and they get back on the helicopter, they're glad to get on that helicopter and get back to their rear.
Yeah.
And I thank God that when I had the chance that I chose my path in the Marine Corps was aviation, because I have high regard for anybody that was on the ground, on the infantry. And I just, God bless them.
Yeah.
So the next time, I was getting near my 13-month enlistment. You know, it's getting like September again. Yeah. September, and typically you get a little nervous the last 30 days.
Yeah.
But then again, here I am, dumb Marine, and I was going to re-up again and stay with my squadron. You could do that.
Oh, okay.
They would let you not re-up, but actually extend your tour of 13 months and stay with your squadron, because they were going to get ready to go off on a ship and cruise up down Vietnam and support the infantry. So I was going to do that, and I was going to extend 6 months, and you get to either fly back to the States or you go any place for 30 days. And I just going to fly back to the States. But anyway, but then about another week or two, a close incident scared the heck out of me. And I then decided not to extend. We were doing a milk run flight with some high-ranking officers going out to the hilltops just to give a hoorah and a few medals and shake a few hands. And we had a colonel and a major. And then we were just flying back to the base that evening. And I was sitting where I was sit like this, and I'm looking out the window of the M60. And right behind me is a little small engine, like a lawnmower engine, and we call it the auxiliary power unit. And we have to start that up first to get juice to the power of start the engine. So it's a little small engine. So it's right behind me. It's got a little muffler, and the muffler goes outside the aircraft. So we're flying about 1,000 feet, maybe less, flying back to Marble Mountain. Oh, I forgot to tell you, when we got this rocket and attack, we only lost so many aircraft. We had about 4 left, helicopters. So they flew what was remaining of the crew and everybody else back to Marble Mountain that night. And then we kind of stole helicopters from other squadrons to kind of bring we typically had 24 helicopters, but we only had like maybe 18 or 19.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So anyway, back...
The little engine behind you.
Oh yeah. So then somebody on the ground, some little Vietnamese or NVA, he decided to shoot at this helicopter, right? So he kind of points his rifle and he shoots, and that bullet came up in the fuselage into through the fuel bladder. Within a split second, it hit the auxiliary power unit behind me, exploded, and the muffler hit my back. And I got a flak vest on, but typically you're leaning over, you got about that much, 4 or 5 inches exposed of your spine. And that muffler hit my back spine flat, thank God. Had it been sharp, it would have probably cut into my spine, and I could have been paralyzed. Yeah. Or I could have been shot by that particular bullet because it had my name on it.
Yeah.
But I found out later that my mother and my grandmother both prayed every day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
fantastic.
We got back to Marble Mountain. We have fuel bladder, which is kind of like a self-sealing. So I told the pilot I couldn't see no fuel leaking out. We were okay. So that night, I spent probably to 4 o'clock in the morning taking up thousands of boats, pulling the old fuel bladder out, putting new fuel bladder in, putting the boats back in. So your mechanic duty is not over just because you got shot.
Yeah.
Shot at.
Back to mechanicking.
So at that point, I went back that night and I said, "You could have been paralyzed or dead.
Yeah, killed. Yeah.
You know, God sent you a signal.
Yeah.
Get the heck out of Vietnam."
Yeah, you got your sign.
So I said, "Okay, I'm rotating," and I got orders to Glenview Naval Air Station, which is a small base up in just north of Chicago.
Oh.
It's kind of a cushy job because it was a 4th Marine Air Wing headquarters. The 4th Marine Air Wing was just a reserve unit. And he had a 2-star general, and he had 2 aircraft, which were reciprocating engines. One was a C-54 with 4 engines, and one was a C-117 with 2 engines. We call it the Goody Bird. So I reported in, and there was typically maybe 20 of us, mechanics and pilots and so forth, and then a whole bunch of Navy guys. And of course, in Chicago, we're only 20 miles away, so I got a chance to drive down to Chicago. I bought me a car.
Yeah.
I had some money, so I bought a car and then living a good life. But being a combat Marine and seeing all the carnage and death and everything, it kept eating at me.
Sure.
And even though Tet Offensive happened, I was watching in my barracks. This is January 31st and February 1st. Tet Offensive is when 1968, when the enemy came out and tried to overrun all the bases and try to convince the South Vietnamese, here's your chance now to overthrow these ugly Americans and join us. And but it didn't work that way. So they killed a lot of innocent Vietnamese, and we killed probably a million, not a million, but a lot of the enemy, and then we won that particular battle. They call it the Tet Offensive.
Yeah.
And I'm watching this on TV, and I'm thinking, I'm seeing all those helicopters and all the infantry. I'm thinking, hey, I could be back in that. They've been pretty good. But then I just going into springtime of '68 and the summer, I finally, I guess I didn't know I had PTSD.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And what it is, the adrenaline.
Yeah.
The adrenaline that you have in combat, you just
It's hard to get away from it to a normal life. Yeah.
So I went to my first sergeant, and I said, I'm going to go back to Vietnam. He said, hell no, you just got here 6 months ago. So he said, you're supposed to be here for another 2 years, and then your enlistment might be up.
Yeah.
So I said, I want to go. No, you're not. So then in a few more weeks, I just kind of nudged him here and there. Hey, Sarge, you think you changed your mind yet? So after about 2 months, I guess he felt like, okay, he is crazy. He wants to go back to Vietnam.
Oh, my gosh.
Maybe if he goes, somebody else will not have to go.
Yeah.
So anyway, he run the orders up, my request, and they got approved to go back to Vietnam. And I wanted so badly to get back in helicopters. For God knows what. I just wanted to get there. So when I got the orders, I had to go back to Camp Pendleton again.
Yeah.
I had to go through a 2 or 3 week jungle training again. And I asked the sergeant major there, I said, why am I going through this again? He said, well, now you're an NCO, you're a corporal.
Oh, wow.
So before I was just a PFC.
Yeah. Can always count on the train.
That's right.
So I did that. Then I got back to Vietnam, and like I said, they depend on who needs you the most. And when I got there, I guess in the helicopter squadrons didn't need me. So a C-117 down in Chulai needed me. So I had to catch a flight down there. Well, first of all, long story was the C-117 was sitting out in Da Nang airport with a blown engine. That's why the need was a mechanic. And the gunnery sergeant was already out there working on it. And so I just took my sea bag, took it out to the airplane and said, I'm your new guy. What can I do? So I started working on it right there. We got the engine changed out and fixed up a little bit, and then we flew from there back to Chulai.
Wow.
And then that's where I stayed for the next 13 months.
Wow.
And became a crew chief on that aircraft.
Now, did you find, like, when you went to Camp Pendleton and you're going through that training again, did you feel like your experiences that you were probably as good at teaching them, or what is what the real reality is?
I felt very salty.
Yeah.
Yeah, here I was a corporal E4, and there was only probably 2 other Marines recycling back, going back to Vietnam.
Yeah.
All the rest of the Marines were brand new, spanking. Yeah. They were heading to Vietnam. So I was a squad leader. My rank then was E4, so I was a squad leader. And I had to go through all the grunt training as a squad leader.
Yeah.
And I didn't know nothing about being a squad leader, but I had to quickly learn.
Yeah.
But I still had the old combat boots from the first tour. So we convinced the first sergeant to let us wear our old combat boots, which was jungle fatigue, jungle type boots.
Yeah.
And everybody else had black boots. So we felt like, hey, we're pretty cool here.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when did you become sergeant? When is that in your timeline here?
Yeah, when I got to Chulai, I flew as a crew chief many times on flights. And C-117 was used primarily to do hopscotch, pretty much, from Chulai to Da Nang, which is 50 miles away. From Da Nang to Phu Bai is another 50 miles. And Phu Bai up to Dong Ha is another 40 miles.
So in helicopter wise, is that a long distance or short distance?
Short distance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like a helicopter, what's a long 100 miles? Or?
Well, before we reported to Dong Ha, back in the summer of '67, we would have 4 aircraft every morning fly from Da Nang or Marble Mountain up to Dong Ha, because we didn't have any helicopters up there. But the infantry up there needed us. This is prior to Khe Sanh, all the build up to Khe Sanh. So we flew 4 helicopters every morning and fly back every night. Sometimes we would go over to Khe Sanh and spend the night there on the base and then fly back to Marble Mountain. So this was needed to have a whole squadron up there, but it didn't turn out to be a good decision because we got tore up and destroyed pretty much. So C-117, the other duties it was to take off the door, put a big pallet of flares in it, and go support the infantry on the ground at night when they needed some night vision, night lights. So my hooch, we actually had a phone in my hut, and at night when the infantry needed us, they would call and they would relay. And next thing you know, I get a phone ring, and then I had to jump in a vehicle and drive to the airplane, crank it up, wait till the 2 pilots get there, then get ready to taxi out. And by that time, we had a crew of guys who would take the door off, put a pallet of flares in, which is about 3.5 feet tall, almost 4 feet tall. And then we would fly over the besieged area and throw out flares. And then we get a few pot shots that way too. So I got 15 air medals the first tour and 3 air medals in the second tour. And typically it's about 20 to 25 missions to get an air medal.
Good Lord.
So the second tour was a piece of cake. It really was.
And you're still throwing, literally you're throwing illumination rounds out, right? So that they can see?
Yep.
Obviously, the enemy doesn't want you throwing light out, so I'm sure you're taking fire on that too.
Yeah,
right?
we turn the lights out on the aircraft. Yeah, the lights. But when you throw the flare out and it pops, and they can hear the engine, 2 engines of this aircraft, and they shot just randomly, hoping to hit us.
Yeah.
But the other side of it was if a bullet came up and through that pallet and hit those flares, we would be a flaming rocket.
Yeah.
Wow.
We would be one charred up Marines. But it didn't happen, thank God. But we did get shot a few times.
When I read your bio, it was over 300 missions?
Combat missions, yeah. Wow. 300 to 400, somewhere in the area.
That's just amazing. Amazing. Thank you. I know we're in the middle of this, but that just makes me want to say thank you for your service. That's just incredible.
But
wow.
That was something that it was just part of my early life that I never thought much about. You did it, and it's like any of the soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen from World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam. You just stepped up. You did what you did. You did it, and I have all the respect for the World War II guys. My gosh, I had my dad was World War II, but he never did go to overseas. Yeah, he was stateside because he came in right at his age was such that he came in right at the end of World War II. But my mother, when he died, my mother remarried twice, and she married another Navy guy who served stateside. But then he died of, ironically, both of them died of pancreatic cancer. My dad and my stepdad. And then my mother waited a while and she remarried again. Yeah. This time she married an Army guy from Bedford.
No kidding.
Yeah. Wow. He joined the Army before D-Day, Boiled Earl Wilson. And he landed in Africa. He was with the Big Red One. And then he went to Sicily, landed there on D-Day. And then he went to Normandy, landed on D-Day there. He had 3 D-Day landings. Wow. And he got a Purple Heart on D-Day at Normandy. So his wife died, and so anyway, they married. Yeah. So I was able to be at the dedication of this memorial in 2001 with him and my mother. Yeah. To see that, and he was so happy. Yeah. And
for you, so when you transition back out so you're done and you finished your second tour, did you have thoughts about making it a career, or were you had enough and you're ready to go to Lynchburg, Virginia? What happened in your thinking there?
Life comes at you not as planned. My plan was then just one day at a time, actually. And then as I was getting near my 4-year enlistment up, and my 13 months in Vietnam again, I'm thinking, well, back up a little bit. I have to. I met a young lady in between tours in Vietnam, and she was a nurse, and a student nurse. And long story short on this one was my other buddy, a Vietnam vet, Marine, helicopter mechanic, combat related. He and I were buddies, so we go out drinking a lot in Chicago area and Glenview. So every month, toward the end of the month, we broke. So the local hospital would give you $15 a pint. So we went to the local hospital, and we met these two young nurses. One was my future wife, Jan. So we gave a pint of blood. We got $15. And typically Marines, we say, "What y'all doing tonight? You want to date?" Yeah. So we took them out for a pizza and beer, blew the $15. So that woman, the lady, the young nurse, was his girlfriend for a while. Then we were girlfriend, boyfriend, but really, at that time, I already had orders back to Vietnam. I had cut and dry, I was going back to Vietnam. And I did not want to get in a relationship at all.
Yeah.
But she got pregnant.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Same thing happened to my dad.
Yeah.
When my dad went with my mom pregnant a second time.
Yeah. So I learned about that on my way back to Vietnam in Camp Pendleton.
Yeah.
And she was able to fly out to Camp Pendleton to say goodbye.
Oh, wow.
And she probably thought that I was never going to come back.
Yeah, yeah.
But I married her. Well, I didn't marry her then. I should have, but to make sure my child had a last name. So when I got to Vietnam at July, about December, late December, almost Christmas time. It probably was Christmas. I got a call going to my captain's office, and I'm thinking, what in the world for? So I got in there, and it's at nighttime. He looks at me sternly. "I heard you got someone pregnant."
Oh.
And I went, "Oh, how'd you know that?"
Golly.
So he says, "I got orders here. Now I got a request, and you don't have to do this. You're in Vietnam. You're a Marine. We need you. But the request is for you to take emergency leave and fly back to Chicago and marry this young lady."
No kidding.
Yep. Apparently, her mother was able to find out somehow through the Red Cross that this could happen.
Wow.
Yeah, this could happen.
Never would have thought that.
Nope. Yeah. I didn't either. I think I was I'm not sure if I was the only one in Vietnam that got this request.
That's incredible. Man, what a story.
So here I am looking at this captain.
Did you think about it? Did you think about it any, or did you just go, all right?
No,
yeah.
I had to, well, he's looking at me and he said, "Here's your decision. The best decision you have to make, or worse. Do you want to do it or not? You don't have to. You can stay right here and just stay in the Marine Corps. Or you can go."
Yeah, you're an honorable man. That's a great decision.
I said, "Well, it is my son," I didn't know if it was a son. It is my baby, so I will go back. Wow. So I had 1 week to get to Chicago and get married and get back. So we got married January the 8th, 1969.
I'll be damned.
Yeah, she was still going to nursing school in her last year. So by the time I got orders back to the States, the baby was 6 months old, was a boy.
Yeah.
So I found out he was a boy when in Vietnam. Somehow or another, I found me a good bottle of whiskey and
nice.
made the toast.
Oh, man. That's
Anyway, we
awesome.
were married, and then so here I am coming back from Vietnam on my 13-month tour, and orders to Andrews Air Force Base to be with the presidential fleet, and I guess I had a bunch of medals, and I guess they just want to use me as a. You see, they're listed as they step off the helicopter to salute the president and so forth. So I was headed that way, even though I had only 3 months left on my 13-month tour. But I was going to go to Andrews and just find out what's going to happen. But when I got to Okinawa, we've always processed in and out through Okinawa. And the lieutenant came up and said, anybody with 3 months or less, even though you have orders somewhere, you can get out. And I knew my wife wanted me out.
Yeah.
And I knew it was probably the best thing for me to be out. So
Yeah.
I raised my hand, and then got to Camp Pendleton and processed out in about 4 days, and flew to just Lockport, Illinois, and became a civilian.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then right away I had to get a job, start making money, and take care of the wife and the kid. Well, she was still going to school, her fourth year of degree there. So.
How do you get from Illinois to Bedford County? How does that
Well,
transition
like I said, my mother's from Lynchburg.
Yeah.
And I lived here 12, 13 years old as a young boy when they got divorced. And my father was in Montgomery, my mother's up here. So when I was 13, I went back to Alabama just to visit my grandmother, not my father, just to see her that summer and then come back up. When I got there, he had already remarried his third wife. And she had two young daughters, and my brother Pat was already living with him. He had already moved down a year earlier. And I was just having a good time in Alabama with him and my dad, and then decided to stay. And there was a very tearful moment when I had to when my mother called me and said, well, you coming home on a bus? I said, no, Mom, I'm going to stay down here.
Oh, daggone.
Yeah, I was 13 years old and stayed down there. And then my father was a construction guy, so he got divorced with his third wife, and he started construction, and that's why we got handed off to my grandmother to take care of us. As he said, I'm going to get you later.
Yeah.
And later never happened.
Oh, we don't.
But my grandmother took care of us very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible stories. I'm so glad that you took the time out to spend with us today. Before you leave, though, how did you get involved in Monument Terrace? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I went to school after my first job at a year, I was a security guard at Joliet State Penitentiary in Joliet. Mm-hmm. And I worked my way up pretty good. I was in charge of the whole in 6 months, where they shipped all the inmates in who were really the worst of the worst. So I was in charge of the whole and day shift, and it was a cushy job. But I had some incidents here and there that I knew this was not my career path. I wanted to go back to school and get my A&P license, which is airframe and power plant license, to work on any aircraft, commercial or private. And I went to Lockport, Illinois. We had a university there called Lewis University. And they had a 4-year degree and a 2-year degree program. And I went a year and a half, got my A&P, took my federal license, passed it. And then I was going to work on my 2-year later on if I got a job at O'Hare Airport, which I did not, because the airline industry was going through a slump and I couldn't get a job nowhere. So I worked as a technician at Joliet Mobile Oil Refinery and making light gases and for about 3 years. And couldn't stand the weather. It was miserable cold, snow. And my mother down here in Lynchburg was getting ready to sell her house and downsize to a condo. So I came down here that summer prior to moving down here, and she said her husband had died, her second husband died. So she was going to sell. And I looked at the house and said, how much? And she said, reasonable. So at that time it was 1971. No, 75. I'm sorry. I'm 75, December 75. So I bought the house for $50,000 and moved down here. So my wife and I went back and forth talking about it, and she was a nurse by that time, RN. So she got a job here at Virginia Baptist and
Oh, yeah.
Lynchburg General. So our marriage was not perfect. We weren't made for each other.
Mm-hmm.
So we stayed married 17 years, had 3 wonderful children. And but then I found my soulmate, Debbie Weinberger, and married her. Nice. So then I got a job with Framatome. I came down here with no job opportunity. Yeah. I just knew I could find a job, no problem. So I got a job with B&W, 1970, well, actually 76, January 76. And then retired 20 years ago after 29 years. Retired as a purchasing agent.
Okay.
And it was a good job.
Yeah.
I had it made, but then I just retired, and so I got involved with veterans organizations back in 1986 when they dedicated the Monument Terrace downtown. Mm-hmm. They dedicated Korea, World War II, and Vietnam memorials. At that time, they did not have any memorials for that, particularly World War II. Because ever since World War II ended in pretty much 45, 46, it took them another 40 years to build a memorial for 180-something men that died from Lynchburg.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, but the city limits of Lynchburg were small back then in World War II. So 186 men died in World War II.
So you were part of the group that does the rally every Friday, right? And you guys have been doing that since November or December 2001?
November 30th, 2001.
Wow. So after 9/11.
Yeah. So I got involved with the Vietnam vets, then the Marine Corps League, and then the American Legion, and the DAV. Next thing you know, I kind of came out of my bunker in 1986 when they dedicated the 3 memorials. And I felt like, okay, life is good. Get on with it. And I started being more active in helping organize the yearly Veterans Day, Memorial Day. And all the World War II guys have been doing it. And so they needed someone else younger to step up. And I just couldn't say no. And next thing you know, I was put in charge of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So when 9/11 happened, that was our Pearl Harbor Day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Man. Well, thank you so much.
What a story.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing with us and taking time out of your schedule to do that. Before you go, you've got the toughest question to answer yet. We always ask our guests, if you could spend 24 hours with anybody, whether it be past or present, who would it be and where would you hang out with them?
That's easy.
Okay.
My grandmother.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The one in Alabama?
Yep.
Oh, man. What a story.